PR Connections Radio presents
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele, and on this edition, we are going to be talking about a departure that is going on with the Vegas Golden Knights organization, as we know the free agency a little over a month away. But we wanted to talk about, as has been reported by multiple sources, that there is going to be a Henderson Silver Knights / Vegas Golden Knights player taking his talents to Russia and playing in the KHL. So on this episode, we are going to be saying goodbye to the departing Sheldon Rempal. We'll kind of go over his entire career with the Golden Knights organization, kind of go over what he did in his tenure with the Golden Knights. So it's going to be a fun episode, and there's going to be a lot we're going to talk about here on Vegas Hockey Hub with your host, Ian Rachiele. Now go to www.prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. Check out all the amazing content we have on the network, over a dozen shows on the platform. If you want to follow Vegas Hockey Hub, we are also on all major platforms at Vegas Hockey Hub. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are on all major platforms. And if you want to follow your host, I'm also on all major platforms at IANJRACHIELE. So this is going to be a really good episode. I'm looking forward to talking about the Sheldon Rempal tenure with the Golden Knights organization and all of that here on Vegas Hockey Hub. Now, getting into Sheldon Rempal, and, I did say that we're going to focus on the tenure of him being with the Golden Knights organization. However, I do want to very briefly establish the background of Sheldon Rempal before he gets to the Golden Knights organization. So I'm just going to spend just a couple of minutes kind of giving you, how he even got to the Golden Knights to begin with. Now, when it comes to Sheldon Rempal, he was an undrafted player. He was not selected in the NHL draft. So let's start from in 2018. As after having a junior career and after establishing himself, when it comes to college hockey and everything like that, he would be an undrafted free agent by the Los Angeles Kings. So the Kings, they would give him a chance. They would sign him to an entry-level contract. And not only would that earn him a chance to be in training camp, not only would that allow him to be in development camp, but eventually, after going through that entire process, he would then earn his opportunity to go to the American Hockey League and play for the Ontario Reign. And what would happen is that when he would go to the Ontario Reign, he would have his first ever season playing professional hockey, and he actually would do reasonably well in his first year of pro hockey, as in 59 games for the Ontario Reign, brought to you by Hockey Reference. He would have 15 goals and 25 assists and around 25 penalty minutes. Not bad for him. Now, the Ontario Reign would miss the Calder Cup playoffs, so he would not get any action in the AHL playoffs. But for his first season out there playing in Ontario, he did a reasonable job. 15 goals in your first year, you have to kind of sit there and applaud that. And then his second season playing for Ontario, his stats would go down just a little bit, as he would play in 56 games, but would be in 4 goals and 21 points. But he would rack up almost double the amount of penalty minutes, around 45. So even though his stats would go down in his second season in Ontario, this would be a situation where Sheldon Rempal would actually earn his first action playing in the NHL, as he would suit up and play in 7 NHL games for the Los Angeles Kings. He would register 0 goals and 0 points, but he would get a little under 12 minutes of playing time while being on the bottom six for the Los Angeles Kings. So by 2019, this is someone in Sheldon Rempal who is 25 years old. And he has already played a handful of games in the NHL. He has played 2 full seasons in the AHL, and he would actually be named to the AHL All-Star game as a representative of the Ontario Reign. So, that 2 years he plays in Ontario as on behalf of the LA Kings, AHL All-Star, bottom six forward in the NHL, middle six forward in the AHL. But what would happen next with Sheldon Rempal would be very important, as he would not be tendered by the Los Angeles Kings. That entry-level contract would expire. He would not be given another contract by LA. So he would sign a 2-way contract and move to Carolina. And the Carolina Hurricanes not only would have him play a few games in the NHL while racking up 0 points and 0 goals on the bottom six, but he would go to the Chicago Wolves in 2020, 2021, and only playing in just 25 AHL games that year for the pandemic-shortened season. He would have just 4 goals and 14 points for the Chicago Wolves. So far for Sheldon Rempal, 3 years into his pro career, 3 seasons playing in the AHL, but he hasn't really had that breakout season, right? He hasn't really had that great statistic that you would be looking for a guy like Sheldon Rempal. Well, that would end up happening the very next season, as in his 4th season playing professional hockey, getting into his age 27 year, he would sign another 2-way contract, this time with the Vancouver Canucks. And this 2-way contract would pay off massively for Sheldon Rempal. Not only would he play in just 1 NHL game for the Vancouver Canucks as a replacement due to injuries, he'd be on the bottom six, play a little over 10 minutes of ice time, and have 0 goals and 0 points. But he would break his career records in the 21-22 season in the AHL, as in 55 games, he would rack up 33 goals. He would have 36 assists and would have 69 points. Nice for Sheldon Rempal. And he would actually get the most penalty minutes of his career, as he would rack up just a little over 45 penalty minutes. So in that 21-22 season, as a top 6 forward for the Abbotsford Canucks, he ended up putting up career highs in so many categories. And more importantly for Sheldon Rempal, he would experience his first ever action in the Calder Cup playoffs, as he would actually play in the first round. They would get eliminated by the Bakersfield Condors, but he would have a 1 goal and 2 points in the Calder Cup playoffs, so averaging a point per game in that first round series. So at this point, for Sheldon Rempal, he has played in 4 full-time seasons in the AHL. He has played in 11 NHL games. And this would be him getting into his age 28 season. And this is where it would all change for Sheldon Rempal. And this is the part where the Vegas Golden Knights will get into it here with Sheldon Rempal. Heading into the 2022 offseason, there would be some interesting moves that would happen involving the Vegas Golden Knights organization as they were trying to get ready to make it back to the postseason. Now, a little bit of disclaimer. Before this postseason happened, this was the first time in franchise history the Vegas Golden Knights missed the Stanley Cup playoffs. So they made a good, decent amount of moves in free agency in 2022. They had minor league contracts, they had major league contracts, but they also had 2-way contracts. And one of those moves happened on July 13th, 2022, as the Vegas Golden Knights would sign Sheldon Rempal to a 2-year, two-way contract, which would allow him to play in the AHL just as long as the NHL. Now, I do want to mention a cap friendly. It did have all the stats and everything on it. It is someone in Sheldon Rempal who was going to be making about $750,000 each year that he was on there. But when it comes to a two-way contract, it really allowed your Vegas Golden Knights to use Sheldon Rempal in a way that he could be beneficial on the bottom six for the Vegas Golden Knights, but he could be just as beneficial as a top six forward in the Henderson Silver Knights, and that's what he would end up doing. Now, for the next 20 minutes, what we're going to do here on this show is that thanks to AHL.com, we have certain games that we are going to be kind of going over during Sheldon Rempal's tenure with the Henderson Silver Knights. And then, with a few minutes left in the show, we will go over the 10 games that he had as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. So, this is going to be what our game plan is going to be, and we're going to talk about all of that here on Vegas Hockey Hub. So, with Sheldon Rempal, he would go into his first season playing for the Vegas Golden Knights organization, and he would suit up for one game with the Vegas Golden Knights. So this is very interesting because due to injuries, that's the only reason why he got called up to begin with. And he was recalled. He played on only that one game, but that one game was interesting enough because according to Hockey Reference, the only game he suited up for the 2022-2023 season was on the final day of the year in 2022 as the Nashville Predators would take on the Vegas Golden Knights, and Sheldon Rempal would be on the bottom six, and he would play in just 7 minutes of ice time. So for the fourth line, he would only play that little amount of time, and it ended up being Kessel. It was him and Phil Kessel. And Sheldon Rempal in just 7 minutes would have 0 goals, 0 assists, 0 points, but somehow would accumulate a -2 as the Vegas Golden Knights would end up winning this game 5-4. But still very interesting how his only game he played for the Vegas Golden Knights in 2022-2023, he ended up having a -2 on the year for the Vegas Golden Knights. Whereas in the 2022-2023 season, he would play in all 70 games for the Henderson Silver Knights. And in 70 games, he would rack up 25 goals on the year. So that's back-to-back seasons with 25 goals or more. He would accumulate just under 40 assists for the Henderson Silver Knights, but he would get 2 more assists than he did the year before with the Abbotsford Canucks. And Sheldon Rempal, for the second time in his career and in back-to-back seasons, he would have over 60 points for the Henderson Silver Knights. So he would have 63 points in his first season suiting up for the Vegas Golden Knights organization. He would also get the most penalty minutes in a season of his career, as he would have 50 penalty minutes in just 70 games. There's also the same Sheldon Rempal that in the 2022-2023 season, he would have 8 power play goals and would rack up 5 game-winning goals for the Henderson Silver Knights. So overall for Sheldon Rempal, he did one heck of a season. And according to Hockey DB, which is where I got this information from, Sheldon Rempal in the 22-23 season for the Henderson Silver Knights, he would have the tie for the most amount of goals in Henderson with Gage Quinney. He would also, like I said, suit up for the most games played out of everybody on that year for the Silver Knights, and he would finish second in assists, second in points, and he would actually finish kind of towards the middle in penalty minutes, because 50 penalty minutes is not that much when it comes to the AHL. So overall, his first full-time season playing in Henderson, Sheldon Rempal ended up being a very serviceable top 6 forward for Henderson. And even though he was not named to an all-star game or anything like that, you can make an argument that he was the MVP of Henderson in 22-23. Now, when it comes to Sheldon Rempal this past season, now thanks to AHL.com, we have the game logs for this past year. And what we're going to do is kind of give a brief recap. Like if there's anything notable that Sheldon Rempal did in the 63 games he played for the Henderson Silver Knights, we are going to mention it. And his tenure with the Henderson Silver Knights started out with a bang, as he would have 4 goals in the first 3 games of the season. So for a guy like Sheldon Rempal to have 7 points in the first 3 games, he had an incredible hot start to the year when he faced off against the Iowa Wild and the San Jose Barracuda. And it was just really fascinating to see how a guy like Sheldon Rempal had such a hot start. So after those 7 points in the first 3 games of the year, fast forward towards the end of October, and on October 24th, Henderson would take on Bakersfield, and Sheldon Rempal would get his 5th goal of the season, making it a goal per game pace in the AHL, and at this point would have 8 points in just 5 games. Now, moving on a little bit towards the back end of the schedule, and by the end of October, Sheldon Rempal would get 4 assists and 5 goals by the end of October. 9 points to start out the first month of the year. There's also the same guy, Sheldon Rempal, who only had 2 penalty minutes in the month of October. So for a guy who accumulated 50 penalty minutes in the first season playing for Henderson, he did relatively well in the first month. Now, in the month of November, Sheldon Rempal would have 4 goals, one against Abbotsford, his former team, Colorado, one again against Abbotsford, and then Bakersfield. So 4 goals, so that would get him up to 9 on the season. And then he would have a multi-point game against the Bakersfield Condors at the end of the month in November. So by that point, for a guy like Sheldon Rempal to have not just 9 goals on the year, but for someone by the end of November to have 7 assists, which would make him a 16-point performance at the end of the first 2 months of the AHL. Sheldon Rempal, now something interesting is that he was really staying out of the penalty box, only 4 penalty minutes by the end of November. So like I said, and I kind of alluded to before, is someone who had 50 penalty minutes in his prior season with Henderson. So for someone like him to kind of like shy away from the penalty minutes in the first 2 months of the year, that was good for him. Now, in the month of December, when it's grueling, when you're really getting into that middle of the schedule, about to get to the halfway mark of the season, Sheldon Rempal would go on a bit of a cold streak, as he would only have 2 goals in December, one against the San Jose Barracudas and one against the Coachella Valley Firebirds. And when it came to assists, only had 2 in December. So look, cold streaks happen, all right? We have seen that in the AHL, NHL, ECHL. But for an entire month to just have 2 goals and 2 assists, that would put him at 11 goals and 9 assists by the end of 2023. Now, the one accomplishment that he did make, however, in the month of December is that he had 8 penalty minutes in 1 month. So he went from having just 4 penalty minutes in the first 2 months to having 8 in just 1 December. So heading into the brand new year, 2024, and Sheldon Rempal would only play in 7 AHL games. Now, I will explain to you why that was, but in those 7 AHL games, Sheldon Rempal would do something incredible. As in 7 games, Sheldon Rempal would have 7 goals in the month of January. And as a matter of fact, he would have a 4-goal game against the Coachella Valley Firebirds the day after scoring a goal against them the previous night. So 5 goals against the same team in the same month. So for a player like Sheldon Rempal to have 7 goals in 7 games, that was remarkable. And by the end of that January, he would accumulate 1 assist as well. So 7 goals, 1 assist, 8 points. That's a little over 8 points per game in the month of January. And when you really sit there and analyze it, this is someone as Sheldon Rempal who would have 18 goals for the Silver Knights by the end of January. Well done by Sheldon Rempal. Is also the same guy who actually limited his penalty minutes and would not have a single penalty minute in January. Now, I only mentioned that he had just 7 games because he would get called up to the Vegas Golden Knights. Due to injuries and due to the stockpile of guys being put on long-term IR, guys like Sheldon Rempal, Jonas Raumbier, Byron Froese, there was a bunch of players called up from Henderson in the middle to end of January. And Sheldon Rempal would make his 2024 debut for the Vegas Golden Knights as he would play on the bottom 6 against the New York Rangers, would not get any points on the board, but did play on that 4th line about 8 minutes of ice time. The very next game, the New York Islanders, and he would get his first ever goal in the NHL. So after having over a dozen games in the NHL, Sheldon Rempal would accomplish a career milestone for him and would get it past Ilya Sorokin, and it would end up being a goal for him on the power play nonetheless, with an assist from defenseman Alex Pietrangelo. And for someone like Sheldon Rempal, I have no doubt in my mind that he definitely appreciated that first goal. You know, after all the years that took for him to get there, after playing just 14 NHL games, around 5 years of doing it, the fact that it took him that long to get his first ever goal, and against, by the way, one of the best goaltenders in the league in Ilya Sorokin nonetheless, that was a huge accomplishment by Sheldon Rempal. And interesting enough, the very next game would be against the New York Rangers at Madison Square Garden. And Sheldon Rempal would actually not only get bumped up to the 3rd line in the bottom 6, but he would accomplish a very good milestone, as he would get his 2nd career NHL goal, and in back-to-back games for the Vegas Golden Knights, thanks to defenseman Nicholas Hague, he would get it past Igor Shesterkin and score the first goal of the game for the Vegas Golden Knights. So, in just 4 NHL games in the month of January, this was a Sheldon Rempal who had 2 goals, no assists, for 2 points on the year. And very interesting how he would get promoted to the 3rd line thanks to injuries. And in the month of February for Sheldon Rempal, he would actually go back and forth between Henderson and Vegas, as he would play in just 6 games for the Henderson Silver Knights, and he would play in 5 for the Vegas Golden Knights. So let's focus on Henderson, and let's focus on those 6 games. Then we'll get back to the 5 for Vegas. So he would go back to the AHL. Injuries would clear up. He would get optioned down. And Sheldon Rempal would keep up his insane production, as he would have 5 goals in 6 games. And there's also the same Sheldon Rempal that ended up having 3 assists in this time frame. So he would end up having 7 points in 6 games. So, yeah, really good accomplishment there. I like what we saw from him. And this is someone in Sheldon Rempal who would get to 22 goals in the AHL by the end of February. And yeah, I really like what we saw from him. The fact that he had 7 points in the month of February, and he only had 2 penalty minutes as well. So he really kept down the penalty minutes. So after having that production in the AHL, a few injuries would pop up towards the end of February. So Brennan Bryson would get called up, Jonas Raumbier would be called up, and Sheldon Rempal would get called up. And in his 5 games in February, he would not register another goal for the Vegas Golden Knights. However, on the fourth line, he would play against Minnesota, he would play against Ottawa and Boston on the fourth line, and then he would be on the third line for the game against Toronto. So Sheldon Rempal would end up getting an assist for the Vegas Golden Knights, and this would be a very interesting assist, as it was actually Mason Morelli who scored for the Vegas Golden Knights, an AHL player who was in the NHL due to injuries. But in his in his kind of interesting spell, this was a guy in Sheldon Rempal who was a bottom 6 forward in the NHL, but at the end of his tenure being with the Vegas Golden Knights, suiting up for 10 NHL games, he would have a final stat line of 2 goals, 1 assist for 3 points in just 10 NHL games for the Vegas Golden Knights. He would have a -4 plus minus. That's not great. And he would have 4 penalty minutes during those 10 games. So for Sheldon Rempal, that was his final stat line for the Vegas Golden Knights. Like I mentioned, 10 games played, 2 goals, 1 assist, and 4 penalty minutes. And after the end of February, he would be sent back down to the AHL, and he would stay in the AHL for March and April. So in March, Sheldon Rempal would go on a cold streak and only have 2 goals and 3 assists for the Henderson Silver Knights. That would only get him to about 24 goals by the end of March. So 5 points in an entire month. And his penalty minutes would actually get up to 6 in the month of March. And then in April, Sheldon Rempal not only would have 3 goals, but in his final game playing for the Henderson Silver Knights, in his final time, them being there at the home, at the Dollar Loan Center, he would have a multi-point game, a goal and an assist in his final home game playing for Henderson. And this was somebody in Sheldon Rempal who would end his tenure with the Henderson Silver Knights, as he would have 27 goals, 18 assists for 45 points, brought to you by the AHL.com, in 63 games for Henderson. And he did accumulate around 20 penalty minutes for the Henderson Silver Knights. And as we have about 90 seconds left here on the show, I do want to say to Sheldon Rempal, him going to Russia, playing in the KHL, I wish him the absolute best. I think that him going to Russia is a situation where it's a career move. He's trying to kind of earn his way, and he realizes being a bottom 6 forward in the NHL, top 6 forward in the AHL is not the best move there. So when it comes to the 2023-2024 season, he did wrap up with the Vegas Golden Knights and Henderson Silver Knights. And now he is moving over to the KHL. And one last note that I do want to mention. When it comes to the team he's playing with in Russia, he does have a teammate I do want to quickly mention. And that teammate just happens to be Josh Levo, who had played hundreds of games in the NHL. And him and Sheldon Rempal have a common link, as they both played for not only the Chicago Wolves of the AHL, but they were part of the Carolina Hurricanes organization around the same time frame. So very interesting, and that is what we're wrapping up here with Sheldon Rempal. once again, congratulations to the going to the KHL. Wish you the best of luck, and we hope you're doing well. And this is Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele, and until next time, have a good
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.